Hello and welcome to our second session of the day, the Fatherhood Summit. This is a summit all about helping men understand the value that they bring to their family. We've talked about some awesome subjects so far. The first subject was faith and how our walk with God, our faith with God, our faith in people can help us to be better dads. Second day, we talked a lot about marriage and how strengthening your marriage is going to strengthen that bond between yourself and your children and implement great value into them. Third day, we talked a lot about work-life balance and leadership within your house. If you're not a leader, if you're not taking those steps to develop yourself personally, then you're not going to be able to implement that value into your children. Yesterday, we talked a lot about personality styles and understanding those personality styles of your spouse and of your children so that you can build a stronger, better relationship for them. Today, we're talking all about business and finances. And along with that, we're continuing this conversation about personal development. And because of that, I have invited one of my friends, coach, speaker, all around great husband, great dad, somebody who really inspires me, Mr. Julian. Kent, thank you so much for being on.
Hey, you're welcome, buddy. I was just noticing my shirt was unbuttoned the wrong way or buttoned up the wrong way here. Sorry about that.
It's all good. Let's go ahead.
I just got off a long trip yesterday.
Hey, you've been all around the United States speaking and dropping your value to youth and adults and about everyone.
Yeah. It's been a good year.
Awesome. So, Kent, you're a public speaker, a coach, a husband, a dad. You also own and operate your own real estate business. So, what are some different ways that you are very intentional about your marriage and about your relationship with your kids?
Great question. And I'll start off by just saying that I've had two different careers. I was a youth pastor for about 20 years, and I was in a small church, one of the largest churches in America at the time. And then I became the national youth director of a couple thousand churches. And then I've been doing, for the last 10 years, I've been doing what I do now, which is primarily being a professional speaker and having a personal business where there's several different streams of revenue. And in every one of those, one of my favorite sayings, this is not original with me, but I love it because it keeps things in perspective. And I heard it when I was first in youth ministry. And some wise older youth pastor at the time told me that God loves you and everybody else has a plan for your life. And I just thought that was great advice. And it was amazing. It was amazing how true that was, that, God does love me, but parents of kids in my youth group had a plan for my life on how they wanted me to be a youth pastor. The board at the church had a plan on how they wanted me to be a youth pastor, the senior pastor, and we could just go on and on and on. And it wasn't that those were bad. It's just that if I wasn't going to be intentional, my life was going to be planned by a bunch of other people. So I'll kind of just say this and then share some things, maybe some different ideas that I've had, and we can have a discussion about it. But it was really interesting. I made a commitment early on when I was a youth pastor that I would not be out more than 3 nights max a week from my family. And if you know anything about youth ministry, there's a lot of night work in that. And I vowed that I would not do that. I would not do that. And I would shoot for 2 or 3 nights a week. And there was occasionally, and when I say occasionally, maybe once a year where it was more than that. But I really kept to that. And what was amazing was this. In a small church, I kept to it. In one of the largest churches in America, where I was working with 500, 600 students and had 120 volunteer staff and 7 paid staff people on my youth ministry staff. I was able to keep to it, and et cetera. So I think the big thing there, and you might have even said it in your question, is you just got to be intentional. And the first step in being intentional is making a decision and even a commitment for how you're going to do that. And so that's what I've done in just different phases. So it's the same thing with me being in business on my own. I've really made a commitment that, and I'll wrap up and then just let you ask me questions so that we can zone me in a little bit. But I have priorities in how I run my life and I run my business, and it's real simple. And again, I've got the spiritual gift of plagiarism. I just steal from other people stuff that works. I picked this up from reading a book on Mary Kay, the founder, Mary Kay Ash, the founder of Mary Kay, and she basically said, if you put things in this order, God first, family second, business third, you're not going to go wrong. And so for me, it's God first, personal development second, my wife third, my kids fourth, and then my business fifth. And I can honestly say that's the proudest thing I've ever done in my business, is stay true to that. And my wife would tell you that, my kids would tell you that. It's not that I never make mistakes, but they know I'm very, very committed to that.
Well, I think that's fascinating, the way that you have your priority list. God first, your own personal development second, your wife third, your family fourth, and your business fifth. Why is that the structure that you picked, and why does that work for you?
Yeah, and I don't want you to hear that personal development before my wife and kids is more important than my wife and kids. It's actually not. It's if I would say in importance, what it would be God, wife, children, and then business. And all I'm doing is putting personal development in there to say, if I'm going to be the best husband I can be, if I'm going to be the best dad I can be, I really, really need to, if I'm going to be the best business person I can be, I really, really need to focus on being the best person I can be. And so that's why personal development comes before them. But again, it's more on just keeping it in order so that I can serve them the best that I can serve them.
That's great. I love that point, is that if you implement, and we've talked about this on the summit a couple of different times so far, but if you implement and understand your own value and you're building yourself up, not building yourself up in a fashion that you're selfish and it's all about taking, it's all about, how much material possessions you can own. But if you're developing yourself to be a better person, if you're implementing that value into yourself, then that value is going to leak into your marriage. It's going to leak into your children.
Yeah.
I love that.
I'd like to say not leak, but flow. You want it to be like open up and flowing. There's a mantra that I say. It's an affirmation. I don't have a lot of them, but this is one that I say to myself pretty much every day. And it just keeps everything in perspective. I say, I want to be the kind of dad that my kids can look at and say with pride, that's my dad. And I want to be the kind of husband. I have a hard time saying it without even getting choked up. I want to be the kind of husband that my wife can look at and say with pride, that's my husband. And so when I don't live up to that, that's a hard standard to live up to. I always say that affirmations are me on my best day. I like to think of affirmations as already not yet statements. These are things that are deep within me that I really want in my life. They're already there, but they're not necessarily not yet always visualized, always experienced. So affirmations for me are not these hokey, name it, claim it type thing, but it is in a way, I'm speaking these realities into existence, and it just keeps me focused. And so those really have been the only two affirmations I've had for my family, simply because that, to me, that kind of says it all, and it puts things in perspective. And I'm a pretty simple guy. I had learning challenges growing up, and so one of the great things about, and I still have those challenges. One of the great things about any kind of challenge, they call them disabilities, any of those kind of things when you're growing up, is that to become successful in life, in any area of life, you really kind of have to simplify things. And so instead of when it comes to my family, instead of having 15 different things I'm focused on, if I just focus on those two mantras, it is amazing how much clarity that brings, and especially in the midst of making decisions. How is this decision going to help me be the kind of dad that my kids will later on look at and say with pride, "That's my dad." And my kids can all say that. My kids are in their early 20s now, and they will all say that. I know they'd say that to you if they were on this. Well, they wouldn't be on this because they're too shy. But if they were on this, not all of them. My son would be on this. But if they were on this, I know they tell you that. I know they'd say that, and they'd say, "Yeah, of course." And that's with all the travel I've done and all those different things. So it's something that you can achieve even in the midst of being very busy, having a successful career, a career that causes you to travel. It's something that you can achieve.
That's great. I love the affirmation you've got there. I want to be someone that my children are proud of.
Yeah. Someone that, and I think it's the way, I really want to just make sure I think this is the way you say it's so important. I want to be the kind of dad that my kids can look at and say with pride, "That's my dad." I mean, it's emotional when you say it that way. I want to be the kind of husband that my wife can look at and say with pride, "That's my husband." That, to me, that makes it very, it gets me in my heart, not just in my head, but in my heart too.
I love that. So, we've already kind of established that you're a busy man. You've got businesses, and you're a public speaker. You're in real estate. You're a husband. You're a dad, and different things like that. How do you balance work, business, life, wife, your children? How do you close off and keep those individual things separate? That way they don't leak into one another and disrupt your marriage and your relationship with your kids.
That's a great question. And by the way, I coached swimming for 13 years while I was doing that. And swimming, I played sports. I coached my kids' sports team, but swimming is unlike any other sports program. It's actually usually a summer swim position is a paid position as a coach. And so you're talking for about 12 weeks, every day from 7 a.m. to 11, I was at practice. I was seeding meets, which took 6 to 8 hours. Our meets would take 8 hours, so it was like having a part-time, it was like having another full-time job for about 12 weeks during the summer. So all that to say, my life is full, but I wouldn't say that it's busy. There's a million different things that we could talk about that, how do you do that? I'll go back to, again, your priorities, just making those priorities. That's really, really important. The other thing is, I would say focus is really important. So I try to be very narrow and focused in my businesses. But not just focused in your businesses. So when I was the National Youth Director of a couple thousand churches, I started my business on the side. This was when my son was 8 and my daughters were 6. And I was able to figure out, how am I going to carve out 15 hours a week to work on this business? And I was able to do it. And my whole idea was, if I could find 15 hours a week, I felt like if I could quit my full-time job and work on a business for a year, like nonstop, I felt like I could get a business launched and profitable. The problem is I couldn't quit my job. My family depended on me working. So instead of doing that, what I did is I said, boy, you know what? I could stretch a year of full-time employment into 3 years if I would just work 15 hours. And when I work those 15 hours, 15 hours a week, they'd be very, very focused. So that's what I did. And if just for your listeners, if you take 15 hours times 48, so you take a month off every quarter, 15 hours times 48 is 720 hours. And divide 720 hours by 40, that's a little bit over an 18 weeks of 40-hour work weeks. Well, do that over 3 years, and that's a whole year of 40-hour work weeks. And so that's how I was able to launch my business. It took me 3 years, but I was able to launch it to where I was making enough money to be able to quit my job. Well, the side total wasn't planning on this, but the blessing to that is I was always a pretty focused person. But when you've got a wife, an 8-year-old, 2 6-year-olds at home, you're not making a lot of money because you're in youth ministry. So money's tight. All those things are going on, and you try to start something on the side. You have to get all the fluff out of your life. You got to get super super focused. And so basically, my life revolved around my relationship with God, personal development, my family, doing a good job at the job that I had because I was really committed to that, and launching this business, and pretty much everything else. And during those 3 years, I put away. And so what was really great is I became a lot less dependent on TV. I'm not dependent on it anymore. So that happened. But all kinds of great things happen, and especially focus. So my door to my office right now is right there. And I used to have this practice when I was working, I would shut the door, and kids knew cannot come in. Even my wife would say, no, that's when he's working. And I'd be very focused at that time. At the same time, when I opened the door and went out and I shut the door, I was able to shut the door on work. And I closed it off. I wouldn't do anything. I wouldn't think about it. And I was 100% there for my family. So all that to tell you, all that stuff that I just told you is I guess I would say the number one secret for me is to be 100% focused where you are. And so when I'm investing in my family, if I come off the road and I'm with my family, I'm there. I'm 100% there. I'm there with my kids when I'm there. And so travel and all that kind of stuff, starting a business on the side, travel now, it's rarely ever an issue. I mean, I miss them when I'm gone. They miss me when I'm gone. But when it's time to be with them, I'm 100% there. When it's time for me to work by the way, one of the things with that is when you are 100% where you are, you get the stuff done that you're supposed to get done. And when it's time to let go of that, you close it. And when you're 100% with your kids, they know you're 100% there. You're not reading a book. You're not just, or reading the newspaper or doing something else or working on work. So I'm kind of rambling, but that's probably what I would say.
Man, I love this imagery that you used with the door. And when it's open, there's the flow back and forth. However, when it's closed, you're at work and your family knows that you're at work. And so there's a balance on that end. At the same time, when you're on the other side, you close your office door. That way your family knows you're 100% invested in them, their dreams, their values, and what's important to them. I think that's something that as men, it's so easy to struggle with.
Yes. Yeah. And so, and we also need to take clues from our wives when they're telling us we're not doing that, and not look at it as nagging, or not let it get to the point to where it's nagging because we're allowing that to happen, to really pick up on those messages early on,
Man, absolutely great. Some great gold nuggets. We're going to go ahead and switch gears a little bit here. And one of the things that you're perhaps best known for is this idea of E plus R equals O. I've actually mentioned it already in the summit because I think it's such an important principle to live for. Yeah, right there you go, the wristbands. So what does E plus R, what is it first of all, and what does it mean to you?
Okay, so it's not original with me. A lot of people think it's original with me. It's not. It's original. I pretty much learned it in 2 different places. I learned it from an educator growing up. He didn't necessarily use that language. We talked about the 4 fence posts of personal responsibility, something I teach today. He didn't call them 4 fence posts, but he called them, he gave me this analogy of fence posts. So I kind of picked that up. I read about E plus R equals O in a Jack Canfield book. Jack Canfield learned it from a mentor of his. There's other people that are out there teaching it. But basically, E plus R equals O stands for the events plus our response equals the outcome. And so what I like to do is I like to compare, there's basically two mindsets people live by. They either live E equals O or E plus R equals O. And E equals O is events equals outcome. And that is our default way of living. I have to fight that. So I'm always fighting against that, because when something doesn't go my way, my immediate reaction is to blame the event, but it's also to allow the event to shape the outcome. And I think that's probably true with everybody. And I don't think, even though I speak on this, I don't think it necessarily, it makes me more aware of it and I pick up on it quicker, I think, because I'm always talking about it. But it doesn't, my gut natural reaction to get angry at the event or blame the event or let the event shape my outcome. You can never succeed. Nobody can ever be successful as a parent in business and anything living E equals O, because events will not always go our way. So, and so the E equals O, if the event goes your way, great, and the outcome's great. The event doesn't go your way, if something bad happens, then it's a negative outcome. E plus R equals O totally shifts the focus and says events are events. The vast majority of them you can't control. So the events are the events, try to make them work the best you can, but that's not what you should focus on. The focus should be on our response. And so no matter what happens in our lives, it's our response. And it's not a reaction, it's a response. One is proactive, one is reactive. Your response means you are response able. No matter what happens in your life, you're able to handle it. And so E plus R equals O stands for the events plus my response equals the outcome. And because I focus on the R, I can take any event and turn it into a positive outcome. I can take the greatest adversity I ever faced and turn it into my advantage. I can take something that most people would be bitter about, and I can allow that to help shape me be a better person. And so E plus R equals O is just a huge, I speak about it, but it's a huge, it's as a kid who was an at-risk kid in the principal's office, about ready to be kicked out of school for something that I did that I, to this day, I'm ashamed of having done. I don't ever share what it is, but it was bad. That's where E plus R equals O, I started learning it. And I look back and I go, the difference from where I was headed to where I've ended up and the kind of life I've had the privilege of living is primarily because of understanding that mindset.
Man, I love this principle. And in case you didn't catch all of that, E plus R equals O, E is the events in our lives. These are things that, like Kent said, we can't always control. As a matter of fact, I usually say, and I come from an attitude of, we can't control those. Events in our life are things that happen to us. There's a lot of things that happen to us in our lifetime. As men, as dads, some of those things can be as small as receiving a bad grade to getting sent to the principal's office, or not having a dad in our life at all. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times we allow those events in our life to change and be the things that shape our lives. One of the privileges I've had is I got to work in prison ministry, and I've had so many men come up and say, man, I was brought up in a drug-infested neighborhood. So what choice did I have except for to go and continue those habits and do the drugs, do the alcohol? And I love what Kent's saying here. And Kent is one of the reasons I'm so passionate about this. And that kind of helped change my life, because the events can equal your outcome. But one of the phenomenal things that Kent said on one of his podcasts is when you live a life of E equals O, if you allow your events to equal your outcome, there's a third part in that people don't tend to realize. And that is that you become a victim of your circumstance. You become powerless. And nobody wants to understand. Nobody wants to believe that they're a victim. The great thing about this E plus R that equals O that Kent's talking about is that we have something that we can control in those situations. If you grew up and you didn't have a dad growing up, that stinks. I understand. But we can take control and change the course of our family's history by living out this E plus R equals O. We can take that, our response, and we can pour that into our wife and into our children, regardless of what our past is. So, Kent, how has this?
Let me just encourage you, because I know that's part of your story. And I just want to encourage you that on my mother's side, my grandfather, his dad was very abusive, and his dad committed suicide. And my grandfather, in fact, as a teenager, pretty much had to clean that up. And so he is a patriarch of our family because he and my grandmother lived a tough life. But on my mom's side, they're I'm a faith-based person, and they're the first people who chose to follow Christ on that side of my family. And so you look at where we are as a family now, our whole family history is different because of that and because of him. And he was the hero in my life. So, I just want to encourage you that way, because he didn't know E plus R equals O, but he lived it. I mean, that's what he was living, and lived a really challenging, tough life. But man, I think the heritage now in our family has been greatly affected because one person, a couple, a man and a woman really decided to not be victims to the events in their lives.
And that is absolutely awesome. I thank you for that encouragement. See, if you change your story, if you take ownership of your story, you can change their life. When I say there, I'm referring to your children, your children's children. You can change your family's history.
Exactly. Generations. Yep.
Amen on that. So how is understanding E plus R equals O, how has that helped shape your views on being a great dad and a great husband?
Again, well, I'll tell you a couple things. One, I'll focus first on just my relationship with my wife. The number one gift we can give our kids is to be deeply in love with our spouse and to be committed to them, to honor them, to treat them with dignity in public and behind closed doors. We're teaching all the time, whether we're opening up our mouths or not. When you got kids around, we're teaching all the time. So I remember, this is interesting, and it's when E plus R equals O was really new to me. And not the concept wasn't new, but the how I was articulating it. You just learn how to articulate it better over the years. But I actually got engaged to a girl before I ended up getting engaged to my wife and married to my wife. She was a great girl. We probably would have really struggled in marriage, but she was a great person. Different things like that. And we decided not to get married. I don't want to get into that so much, like all the reasons why, but it shook me big time because I was like, I was a couple months away from marrying someone that I don't think it would have been a healthy marriage. Again, not that she was not a good person or whatever, it just wasn't a good fit. And I remember reading a book, and it just popped out. And I can honestly say I've strived and I think accomplished living this way. So I read a book that said, when you get married to the person you get married to, I can't even remember what book it was, but when you get married to the person you get married to, you have to accept, and not only accept, love them 100% exactly the way they are if they never change. This is not a work in progress. And that was my biggest problem with the first girl I was engaged to is I think I loved her for who she could be, but I didn't necessarily love her for who she was right then. And there's like, you have to make that decision before you get married, 100% exactly the way they are. If they never, ever change 30 years from now, they're still the exact same person, hasn't changed a single habit. You have to love them 100% because your job is not to change them. That is not your role. That's God's role. Totally not your job. Your job, and let him do it according to his purposes and according to his timetable. And you shouldn't even be thinking about that. You shouldn't be thinking about, well, if they would just do this, or if they just change this way, or they should do this, you know. You just need to 100% love them for who you are and focus on changing your stuff, you know, focus on what God wants to do in your life. And I can honestly say I haven't been perfect. And there's been times where I go, well, if Kathy would just do this, but it has been few and far between. And I catch myself real early in that process. And I think for me, that has been a game changer because I'm not saying Kathy's the E. That's my wife's name. I'm not saying she's the E in this equation. I'm just saying she is who she is. And my focus is on loving her, but not on trying to shape that at all. It's on me and my response to God, my response to her, my response to the situations. Again, haven't been perfect, but man, that was so, I am so grateful I read that before I got married to her. And I got that right in my mind because it was such a negative thing in all past relationships that I was in. It was almost like I was always marrying a work in progress instead of saying, this is the person 100%, I accept and love 100% who this person is. So I'll just leave it with that. That's been a great way to see, E plus R. And I would even say that's, you shape your kids a lot more, but you got to let them be who they're going to be. I think all my kids would say, hey, Dad challenges, encourages, and loves us, supports us, but he's not trying to make us be a miniature version of him, or even, my values, yes, but not, I want them to be them and to be the best. I always say to them, I want you to be the best version of you that you can be. So I hope that answers it for you.
Man, that's great. And there's so many different nuggets of wisdom in your answers and so many places that we can dive. Unfortunately, because of time, we can't get into all of them, but one of these days I'm going to get you on my podcast and I'm sure we'll have more fatherhood summits and different things like that we can dive into a couple of these different ways that you encourage your wife and encourage your children to be the best them possible. As we wrap up, what are some of your favorite resources on fatherhood and on marriage, and how have they shaped your relationship with your family?
All right. I'm going to share one that you might not even know. And it's a book I wrote. It's the first book I wrote. I actually wrote it, and I'm telling you, I don't know, you might be able to find it on Amazon for a penny. I wrote a book back when I was a youth pastor with a lady who had kids in our youth ministry, and I wrote from a professional who worked with young people, and she wrote from a parent perspective, and we wrote a book, How to Get Your Teen to Talk to You. And I think it's a great resource. It's gotten great reviews over the years. I mean, but this is, gosh, we probably wrote it back in like 2002, maybe 2004. So it's called How to Get Your Teen to Talk to You. Multnomah put it out. It's not in print anymore, but I know there's copies flying around the internet. So I just think that's a great resource because, again, the focus isn't on how do you talk to your team. It's how do you create a team. It's how you create an environment in your family where it's conducive for your family for your kids to talk to you, like they want to talk to you. So that would be a great resource. I loved books like Raising a Modern Day Knight. That's a great book. I would challenge people too. There's resources in your churches, in your communities. My wife and I often say when I was in youth ministry and we moved to Omaha, Nebraska, at the time it was one of the larger churches in the U.S. We didn't have kids when we moved up there. We had all three of our kids during the 8 years we were up there. And I'm telling you, we got a front row seat on the results of parenting. And so we got to watch almost like sociologists, and we would go, these young people seem to be turning out right. And in fact, no matter kind of where they were on the spiritual side of things, even if they weren't really necessarily interested in following the Lord, but came from a house um, that was a solid family and that was teaching them how to be responsible adults and stuff. And we would just sit back and go, they're doing this, this, and this. It makes sense for us to do that. And then we'd look at other kids that were a mess, and we would see common patterns in those families. And we'd go, man, they're doing this, this, and this, and that doesn't seem to work. Now, it was a very generalized, that's why I use the word sociology. It's very generalized way of looking at things, but it was pretty consistent. I mean, you had the black sheep every once in a while, and then you have really solid kids coming out of really tough backgrounds. But those were, I mean, often that was kind of the exception to the rule. So anyway, I just would say maybe some of the best resources people would have is by literally getting connected with people in their in churches or people they respect and just watch. I have this strategy that I use in business, but I actually learned it when I was in youth ministry called reverse interviewing, where I find people I respect. I do this all the time. I find people I respect. I take them out to lunch and I ask them questions. I just flew this week. I went out to Portland to meet with one guy that's in business to reverse interview him. And we had a 3-hour dinner, and I just asked him all kinds of questions about his life and everything like that. I do this all the time. Well, when I was a young father, guess what I was doing? I was taking out dads that I could go, man, their sons, their daughters are turning out right. And I picked up so many great ideas. I'll just share one real quick idea. So being the youth pastor or anything, I got to perform a wedding of a girl that was in our youth ministry. And the rehearsal dinner, the dad stood up and talked about this ring he gave his daughter when she was 15. It was called a promise ring. And the whole idea that he had her heart and that she promised to let him keep his heart, he'd be number one in her heart, and the whole idea of keeping yourself pure until you get married. And he gave that ring to his soon-to-be son-in-law, the next day to be son-in-law, and say, this ring is going to be yours tomorrow, because tomorrow you're going to have her. You have her heart going forward. I mean, it was beautiful. So guess what I did when my girls turned 15? We went out together, and I let them pick any ring they wanted, and I gave them a promise ring. And they're both in college now, and they wear their promise ring all the time. And we talk about it all the time. I mean, not all the time, but we talk about it a lot. I mean, every time I see that ring, I bring it up and encourage them to continue to pursue purity, and they can choose to do what they want. But man, to have a dad that is talking to them about that and saying, I want you to value you as much as I value you, and even more. I mean, those are just powerful things. I didn't get that reading a book. I got that from reverse interviewing, from being around other men that I looked up to and said, how do you do it? What are the ideas do you have? And so I just would encourage, those are probably the best resources, or maybe sitting right next to you in church on Sunday, or at the Kiwanis that you're going to, or some business person, and you go, how in the world are they successful in business? And they've got a great family life. How are they doing that?
Wow, I love that. I love the symbolism of the ring. So many times we think of that as just a marriage commitment, but to have that type of commitment between a father and a daughter saying, sweetheart, I will cherish you. This is a symbol of my heart and how much you mean to me. And I want you to wear that. And then when she does get married, she has a chance to give that to her husband and say, this is a symbol of my heart. I absolutely love that. That is a phenomenal example. Some great resources. Kent, as we wind down here for the Fatherhood Summit, I know you're a busy man. You've got a lot of different things you're doing. You're going and about to spend some time with your kids.
Yeah. Right after this, I'm driving down to Georgia Tech to pick up one of my daughters for Christmas break.
just a great example of a great dad. So Kent, tell us a little bit about your business and what's the best way for people to get in contact with you?
So the best place to find out about my business is at liveitforward.com. And there's just blogs there. I podcasted for a couple years. There's a lot of podcast episodes all about how to move from dream to do in your life. So many people get stuck dreaming about big dreams, and I say they get stuck in dreamland because 10 years later they're still dreaming the same dreams, or those dreams have become nightmares because they haven't done anything about it. And so we talked on that podcast about dream to do and all that kind of stuff. So that's the best place. And if people want to get a good feel, I just thought I've got if they want to text to the number 44222. So you just text in your phone 44222 and then text the phrase lead life, but it's got to be one word, lead life. If you do that, you'll end up, they'll ask for your email, but you'll get what we call our 3-pack, our empowerment 3-pack. You'll get 3 articles. How to lead your life from quiet. It's something I practice every single day. 5 empowering choices you can make, and then 7 steps to starting a profitable business. So they're just nice little resources. So they can go to Live It Forward to find out. But if they're like, hey, I want some resources, that's probably the best thing. So it's lead life. You text that. It's got to be one word, lead life, to the number 44222, and then just follow the prompts.
I love that. Constantly giving, constantly willing to give of yourself, and again, your free time helping us out here at the Fatherhood Summit. Just a word to anyone who's listening: if you want to learn and understand this idea of to stop dreaming and start doing, take a look at what Kent has to offer. He has got a great podcast. He recently just ended it, but like he said, he had about 2 years of just great knowledge, great stuff for business, great stuff with family, great stuff to chew on and to make you think. So definitely take a look at what Kent has to offer. He's a man of his word. He's he's a great guy. I feel privileged to know him and have had a great chance to sit down and talk to him more than once. And it's something I really look forward to. So Kent, thank you again for being on the Fatherhood Summit.
You got it. Thank you, buddy. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, to finish up, do you have any closing words or closing thoughts, closing advice for parenthood or marriage?
I just would say, man, those mantras I shared at the beginning, that's the core, like boils it down. I want to be the kind of dad that my kids look at and say with pride, that's my dad. And I want to be the kind of husband my wife looks at and says with pride, that's my husband. If I can do that, if we can all do that, we'll be lucky men, and the world will be a much better place.
Awesome words of advice. Definitely something to keep on your mind, man, as we go and we live through life. Thank you guys for checking us out today. If you want a little bit more information about what Wrestling with Fatherhood is all about, take a look at our website, www.fatherhood.com. Again, that's www.fatherhood.com. Also, make sure you check out our podcast. We have had most of the guests on the summit on my podcast, dropping great information. I'm currently working with Kent to try to get him on my podcast and see if we can definitely make sure that happens. So check out those things. Thank you for checking us out. And I hope you guys all have a great day.